Greetings, everybody. I'm Jeremiah.
That's him.
She's Vania.
That's me. Welcome to another episode of the Beard and Curls podcast, where culture and creativity meets consciousness.
And if you're new here, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite platform for the latest, most exciting conversations anywhere.
You ready?
I'm ready. Cue that intro.
What's up, guys? It's your girl, Margot Bingham.
Karen Parsons.
You're now tuned in.
You're now tuned in.
You're now tuned in.
You are now tuned in.
You are now tuned in
to Beard and Curls.
Beard and Curls.
Beard and Curls.
Beard and Curls.
Beard and Curls. Keep it locked.
What up, BNC family? Today's guest is an actress and newly politically outspoken. You may have seen her on such shows as The OC, Resurrection, and countless movies. We're talking about none other than Samaire Armstrong. Samira, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, most definitely. So we're going to jump right into it. So before we get into more of the current stuff, I wanted to kind of just maybe go back a little bit and talk about some of the things that we don't always think about as being associated with you. So you were born in Tokyo, you were born in Japan, and you actually spent some years out there, and you even kind of traveled as a kid. So what was that experience like?
You know, it was super strange and isolating. I remember just always being like, this is a weird life. You know, it was my mom, my dad, and I, and we'd be in Tokyo, we'd be in Kyoto, we'd be in Nagoya. I was generally the only, kid in a situation. But I remember consciously being like, this is strange. And growing up in Japan, there's such a magical environment, whether it be the traditions that they have or the festivals that they put on. It was super not normal, very fantastical. And, during certain times of the year, the entire month would be lit on fire in katakana that says strength. Or sorry, kanji or katakana, one of them. But you would walk through a forest filled with books, and there'd be like fog, and it felt so mystical. And the books, it was a bookstore in the middle of the forest, just like the Golden Temple and all these. When we lived in Kyoto, there was a river that a certain time of the year they would dye the kimono, the cloth for the kimonos. So the river itself would be just like bright blue or bright pink and all these beautiful colors. And then the cherry blossoms would be falling. And it was very impactful. Even though I had nothing to compare it to, I still was like, wow, this is weird, and I think in a lot of ways it set the tone for my mental state and high expectations out of life in terms of like what was visually presenting itself. Like it started out of the box very high, you know what I mean? Like bright colors, bright experiences, but also kind of confusing. So my father moved us to Japan because he was studying a traditional battlefield sword training. He's in a study of anthropology that studies combative behavior. And because we were sort of like this nuclear family that just went to all these strange places, like I became his training partner consistently from the age of 5 and on. And of course, what an amazing experience, but also it was very, very like, imagine your father being your sensei, and we're training battlefield sword training. It's not like just get a belt and go through a contest. It's like get beat up, fight or be beaten, basically. And the biggest practice, which was the hardest for me to grasp, was not about being strong physically, but being strong mentally and being in control of my emotions mentally. Because, you get hit on the head and you just want to like lose your mind and like, how dare you, and like fight back. So that was like all a very young age experience, from like 5 to 13. We left Japan, we moved to Hawaii. I was maybe 11. And so then we lived there for several years. And, again, Hawaii, really beautiful, lots of tradition, lots of culture. And the experiences, like we were left to roam the rainforests like so young, like you could never imagine your kid nowadays being like, yeah, go ahead, go get lost in the rainforest. And we would get lost in the rainforest and just make it home without falling off a cliff or, whatever. But those were my youthful experiences. In the midst of that, I always wanted to be an actress. I'm not sure why. I didn't have like a lot of film and television experience in terms of, Japan, you watch a lot of anime. Movies came out several years later than they were out in the United States. My first movie that I saw, and this defines me as well, was Aliens. And it was, you know, the little girl inside of the spaceship all by herself. So like mentally, that's very much like who I related to. It was like, we got to survive. There's this monster coming. That was just my experience. Also born on Halloween. So it was just like this weird concoction of bizarreness that was not lost on me. I aspired to have a normal life so bad, you know, and eventually we moved to Arizona, and I continued to pursue like school theater and whatnot, be involved in the community theater. And then I went to U of A for a year, but I was like, why am I going to go to school for something I've been in school doing on stage? I need to go out to Los Angeles. And my parents were very supportive of that. And so I moved out when I was 18, and it's been, I guess, like almost 20 years now.
How do you think like those early experiences, like traveling around, moving around, kind of shaped you to become the person that you are today?
I definitely, and I think this was part of the tactical plan that my parents had in mind through that process, was that I would be able to handle any situation that came at me, sort of a life training that would lead me to be able to stand on my own and be firm in my beliefs and, you know, withstand whatever inevitable contrasting experiences that would come at me in my future. And I don't know if it was a naivety or what, but I definitely was like, well, yeah, I'm going to make it out here. I'm going to make it. You know what I mean? Like, and it turned out to be not quite as easy as I anticipated it being. And actually, as I've gone on, it's certainly become more challenging as, you know, the young ingenue grows into the older character, and they're like, meh, you know.
What was that journey like to really pursue that life as an actor?
So it was interesting. I came out to Los Angeles. I had a very secure self-identity. And the first thing I was told, I had a couple meetings with some agents, and I had just come on the heels of spending a summer in Tucson, Arizona. So I was very tan. The first thing they said to me was, "You're not white enough." And I'll never forget this, because I was like, how dare they? You know what I mean? Like, how can you say that? Like, what about people who, I have a tan? Like, this is, you know, this might go away, but what do you say that to people who can't like go whiter? Like, and they said, you need to emulate, you know, a certain character on a TV show. You need to be more like her. And this is typical of Hollywood. They see what's been successful, and they don't really allow for inspiration to break through unless someone's like, hey, this is the breakthrough. They're like, oh yeah, this is the breakthrough, you know? And so I tried to fit in, you know, into this cookie cutter sort of perception of what they said I needed to be. And it did not work. You know, it just like fell flat. And so finally I cut my hair short. I started like really like being like, you know what, this isn't working. I'm going to do it my way. I dyed my hair blonde because I was brunette. And I just started tapping into something inside of me that we all have the accessibility to. And I started listening to that more. And I had that rebellious heart, so to speak. And that's when things started working. And I remember writing sort of a mission statement out. I wanted to, for myself, I want to be a character that is on television that I could relate to. Because up until then, you know, it was just like the girl next door, the blonde girl. And I felt like I was a lot more punkier and like spunkier than what I saw on television. And then with the OC, I was given that opportunity. The character was actually written as like long brown hair, bookworm. And it was at a turning point in my career at the beginning of it when I was like, I'm just going to do me and see what happens. And for whatever reason, that worked. And that was the character that I got to be. It was the mission statement that I had set up for myself, like that unique, different character that's not on television yet.
I think that's awesome. I like everything you're saying, Samira. So like when you think about like just what it took to get to where you eventually got with that character on the OC, Anna. And so like when you were early on where people were saying, well, you're not white enough, how did you keep yourself from letting that discourage you or break you to where maybe you stopped in your tracks and didn't want to continue?
I think at the time I just didn't know any better. And because I've heard things now, it's the opposite, which is you're too white, because now there's all this diversity. So for the last 6 years, you're white. It's diversity. We're doing diversity. You're now also not only white, you're old. And so now I'm like, okay, I guess I'm tapped out. There's nothing. But in my youth, I was like, I didn't even hear it. You know what I mean? Like in my youth, it was like, there's something wrong with you to be saying that. And now I think in a lot of ways, I'm like, are they right? You know, and I'm questioning it. By the way, diversity in Hollywood, so necessary, so obviously necessary. I felt it when I first came to Hollywood. When they said that was the first meeting I had with an agent. They said that. In the last 20 years, I think it was 12 years ago, I had an audition. It was for a pilot with Minnie Driver. And I was testing for the part of this sort of like computer whiz. I didn't get cast in it, they said, because my love interest was Black. This is what they said. America wasn't ready for an interracial relationship. And
well, if you look now, that's all you pretty much
that's all you got. That's all you got. And it was like, why? At the time, I couldn't understand why. You know what I mean? That's so unnatural. Why would America care? The truth is, America wouldn't care. Hollywood cared. Hollywood is always the last to know. And I compare Hollywood to communism because communism is a construct. Do you know what I mean? Like, let's solve this and figure it out. And then in the end, everyone suffers. Whereas an organic process of capitalism, which is started from trade and barter and like becoming more sophisticated in that approach, like everyone has an opportunity. Again, I'm so excited that diversity has found Hollywood. Unfortunately, I think the stories that they're telling are lacking a lot of heart and are doing it to check off a mark versus stories that we're really experiencing. Because now I feel like it's a narrative. You know, it's right. Not. It's like this is the archetypal woke liberal experience on your television versus like a genuinely authentic story that you and I are experiencing in life right now. You'll never see that.
Wow. No, that's powerful. And that's actually something I was going to ask you about. So like, obviously, you know, you talked about pursuing this. So like when you think about the essence of why you want to be an actress, can you kind of share a little bit about what it means to you to express yourself in this art form?
It's funny you asked that. My answer 10 years ago would be so different than it is today. And 10 years ago, I felt compelled and obligated to fill the sort of destiny that I felt within me to act, to tell stories. And I think a couple components have changed. One being, as I mentioned, the inauthenticity of the storytelling. So there was this big like feminism movement right before the woke movement. There was like right before the Me Too movement, there was like women power, you know, and women are strong. And when that started to happen, I saw a real distinct pressure to check the marks off, you know, like the female superheroes were strong feminists, don't need men. And I started to not feel that drive really, because I want to tell stories grounded in some sort of truth, you know, like I'm the biggest fan of fantasy, and sci-fi is my absolute favorite genre. Aliens, I think probably because it's the first movie I saw, is Terminator. I love that stuff. And those are very strong female characters, but the way that it was happening and I was seeing it presented in Hollywood, I just didn't buy it. And as this progression of feminism, Me Too movement, woke movement, I felt further and further apart from wanting to play along. I couldn't explain it at the time, but the idea of it seemed like every celebrity had a charity that they're a part of. And I found that to be strange. It just hit me a weird way. It's like, oh, okay, what's your charity? I'm like, I mean, I don't have a charity. You know, I'm not sure. But it was, I couldn't figure it out at the time, but it just felt off. And then this whole movement of, you know, gosh, there's so many things, but basically everyone became a brand. And that wasn't really how it was at first. You know, you did a few commercials here and there, but you yourself weren't attached and didn't make money as a brand significantly, not to the level that it is now. And everything became about branding. And then the idea of being a participant in a movement made me want to gag. Like, why are we on this movement? Like, who's in charge of this movement? I think it was during Me Too. Everyone was supposed to show up in black. Why?
So let me ask you this. So do you feel like when things happen in Hollywood, there's like always like a movement behind it? I'm just going to give you an example. Like I remember like, because you and I are around the same age. And so I remember it was maybe late 90s or something like that, or early 2000. There was this push to have everybody drink milk. And you would see all these celebrities.
I remember that.
And
Yes.
everybody had like a milk mustache on billboard.
Yes. Totally. Yes, there's a reason for that, and it's a monetary reason. It's a whole industry. I'm so glad you said that. There was also a movement at one point, I think while we were in school, that was plastic. It saves lives. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
I remember thinking like, this feels weird. I'm like, just, I don't know, just feels like someone's trying to sell us something.
I mean, I'm just going to go back and forth with you on this because now I'm seeing like, even like if you go on like a lot of the celebrities pages, it looks the same. You know what I mean? Like they'll have the same images, same things. And it's like,
yeah.
What is that about? So you all believe in the same thing, or are you being told that this is what you need to do?
And both is what it is. There's like 5 of us in Hollywood that are speaking out right now in support of things that are against the narrative. There aren't a lot of us doing it in my industry anyway. And there's a reason for that because it's tied up in finances. So the last 2 years specifically, I kept saying to my agents and my managers, like, I know white people are working. I see it on television. Like, we have to think outside of the box. I can't just be hearing you're too white, you're too white all the time. The funny part of the situation was that I was still getting offers on movies. I'd do up to 4 movies a year. And my agents and my managers, they take the cut. And, this is because I have a relationship with the director or the writer, whatever. But then my agents and managers be like, no, but we can't get you any work. And that kind of like cracked my psyche open internally. I had let go of my agent and manager. I had a meeting with a new manager, and it was the same thing. Everyone knows you as Anna. Nobody really wants to get to know you any differently. They think they know you're not right for the part already. It's going to take a lot of work. There's not a lot of roles for white older women right now. And as you said, like when I was younger, I would have not even heard it. I would have just kept going. But now that I'm older, the idea of participating with it continuously, I don't know if I just didn't have the energy, but I did feel intuitively that I would be able to step away from it and create my own content you can make TV and film on your own so easily now with your own camera, your own lights, anybody can do it. Last year, I started doing just that. I had a partner and we were making short films and really, small, funny content. And my idea was to start to grow that and be my own producer because I got to tell you, there's nothing worse than actor who feels like they have something to say, but only being able to speak between action and cut. I wanted to be a part of the creating of the story after all of these years of hearing, this is how it is. And now it's this way. Well, no, it's this way. So for no arbitrary reason whatsoever, other than like that was bankable, right? Because now everyone's being bullied into make this content or, we're going to, not watch you. Don't hire this person or
you're going to get canceled.
Right. There's this actress right now. She spoke out against having to wear masks and also everything being shut down and locked down and saying like, basically saying like this is hurting people more than it's helping people. And now there's this petition to cancel her. And she's, got 2 million followers on Instagram. She's not saying anything insane like maybe I'm saying, you know what I mean? Like she's just like, hey, do these things work? There's been a lot
She's asking questions.
Yeah, there's a lot of studies and research suggesting it doesn't, and now it's like get rid of her. But that's the sort of weird mob mentality that's going on within obviously many industries, but particularly the one I know, this industry. Before COVID happened, I was talking to people at Sony to start developing my own projects. And we were gathering stuff and putting time and energy into that process. And I haven't talked to them since. I talked to them during COVID, but I can pretty much guarantee that since having spoken up, I don't have that opportunity anymore because I've gone against the narrative.
Even if somebody were to go to like your page right now, your Instagram, up to a certain point, we'll see a certain format and how things work. And then it got to that point where you became outspoken about your political view. So kind of walk us through what was behind that. Like what went into that decision to say, okay, now is the time for me to say what is on my heart.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so I'm registered independent. I've always been pro Second Amendment, very adamant about people having the ability to have freedom of speech, even if I don't like what you're saying.
What was the reaction that you got going public?
Yeah, the reaction, because I had already let my agents and manager go, there was no one to sort of like fire me and tell me, hold something over me to say like, you can't say this or you can't say that. I had the freedom to do that without a consequence in that regard. So I gained 30,000 followers, like basically overnight. People were hungry for this sort of, I guess, because I started like, sharing people's voices and giving people the opportunity to say things that might otherwise not be heard. They were hungry for that, especially I think coming from Hollywood, because nobody's really saying it. It's like, and you start to feel as a society gaslit. Like, what? Am I the only one in the room who sees this elephant? Like, what? Don't we all see what's happening here? And like everyone's like, nope, don't see it at all.
Nothing to see here.
Nothing to see. Keep walking. So it has been very positive. There's been, and I'm super open to debate and having conversations. I'm not trying to change anyone's mind. I think that process needs to happen on your own. And I definitely am open to seeing things from other people's perspectives.
I wanted to kind of go back to what you said as far as like letting your agent go, letting your manager go. So were you prepared for anything that might happen, including maybe giving up your career?
Yes. I figured that by speaking out, I made peace with the fact that I was likely giving up my career. And as I said, over the last few years, the things that I saw happening and going on, it would have been a lot more of a heartbreak. And trust me, I'm heartbroken. I am. But I've already sort of like distanced myself from the industry in terms of because I won't participate in the way that is expected of actors to participate. And I found out I have a lot of conservative friends, actors. I'd known them for 20 years. None of us knew each other were conservatives because we were all in the closet about it, And when I say conservative, I just mean like, pro Second Amendment and like, what I mean? Like just a silly, normal American thing. But because I saw things changing over the last decade, and I was becoming accepting of the likelihood of not really participating in a traditional way anyways, it was like, okay, the value of speaking out far outweighs what I might possibly inevitably lose. My whole thing is I just want to tell stories. I don't want to tell conservative stories versus liberal stories. I just want to tell stories, and I think we owe that to America to not have it be so heavily one way or the other, because America's absolutely everything, every shade of reality in between, the spectrum of color, in terms of like thoughts and joy and, interests and.
Yeah, and that's the thing though, Samira. I think, that's kind of how I want to kind of end this podcast, is to kind of just remind people the whole thing that you're fighting for is just for people that have independent thought, to be able to just, like you said, you're not trying to create liberal content or conservative content. You just want to create content that you enjoy, that you're free to create, that speaks to you and your values. And at the end of the day, if everybody can respect that and appreciate that, I think we'd all be better off for it.
Absolutely. To normalize the idea that, not everything is so like soft and hard, like, not everything is so black and white, not everything is liberal, conservative, or racist, not racist, or, whatever. It doesn't have to be so contrasting. It can be everything. And I think personally for me, I have to figure out, like, I have to leap back into that, because right now I'm like shining the mirror on everything. And that's really, it's an extreme version. It's so far right now, what I'm doing. That's not where I want to be. You know what I mean? Because I look at myself as an independent, and I've in the process like gone so extreme onto that right side to show how crazy what I see the left to be, but I don't want to stay there. I don't want to hang out there. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just want to live. And I think what my friends and I are talking about doing is telling American stories, going around and making videos and storytelling of Americans with perspectives, like, you know, coming to you and talking to you of what you know, what your life story is. How did you get to this perception? And like, you know, how do you see things? Like, that's the stuff that interests me. And I think that's where I'll be heading going forward.
Wow. No, again, Samira, I appreciate everything that you're doing, because I see the work that you're putting out and it's constant. I'm like, man, this Samira sleep, you know? I just want to say on behalf of everybody who appreciates the work that you're doing, we just want to say thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak with you on this.
Well, there you have it, folks. That's our show for today.
Thanks again for tuning in.
And as always, like it or not, Beard and Curls is the new his and hers.